Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is Lessons for Full Spectrum Humans on October 6th, and this is the level 1 presentation is going to be all about the specifics of Flying Rainbow Lasagna affecting one's DNA. So first, let's get into, I'm going to get lots and lots of pictures and make my squinty scrolly faces. Hold on a minute, got everything organized for today down here. So these pictures come from a video that I got that I have shared with you in the supplemental homework playlist from YouTube. And this is all about epigenetics. So first of all, let me just write that word so that we know what I'm talking about. Epigenetics, this means the code that rules the code, because genetics, this is our genetic code that it determines not just the physical protein structures of our body, but also our experience of moving through time. I've drawn this before, these little, here's a little box, and now let's presume that all the rest of these are boxes. Time cars of reality, and that this green, I'll make a green squiggle, this green squiggle is like the integument that ties together each moment of time. Each one of these is like 101, 102, 103. We're moving through time, and your consciousness literally jumps from train car to train car to train car. And that jumping motion has everything to do with the whirling and twirling motion of one's DNA. So I feel like I should go back to my face, but I want to show you pictures first. Look at these various different pictures while I speak. Your DNA is not a flat, static object. So often DNA is presented just as, here, let me draw this like, oops, get something, here we go. Your DNA is presented as, like, here's the cell membrane, here's the nuclear membrane, and a lot of science books will just show you, like, here's a curled up X-shaped chromosome inside of your nucleus. And the truth is that your chromosomes are only tightly coiled like that during a very small and limited portion of your cell's lifespan. A neuron can last for 60 years, and that this is the preparation that a cell goes through to split itself in half. Like if I were to, draw a line here, like we're bifurcating this cell, that's mitosis. It is how a cell makes a replication of itself. So I should go into also that there are two different things that DNA is doing. DNA, on the one hand, many people are familiar with the idea that DNA is preparing one generation to transfer information to the next generation, like reproduction from a parent to a child. DNA is also involved in, drawn here, in creating copies of cells. So here's one little cell, and when it copies itself, then we have two little cells. So there's two different aspects of genetic copying or reproduction or replication that are going on here. One is, from mama's generation to baby's generation. And the other one is within this generation from one cell over here over to this cell over here. So, and these are different aspects of genetic behavior. So now let me rewind back a little bit in some of these pictures. Your DNA is not always a tightly coiled X-shaped chromosome. For much of its lifespan, when it is not coiling up in preparation for mitosis, which is the cell division, here's one cell splitting itself in half and becoming two cells. That's why DNA goes into the shape of a chromosome. But for all the rest of the lifespan of DNA, here now I'm drawing the cell membrane, the nuclear membrane, and now here is DNA that is unfurled in the nucleus. And the nucleus, this, the central aspect of the cell, is like the library of the cell. This contains all of the vital information about life, about what protein structures are going to be shaped like, and also about what events are going to be structured like. And this over here is what I'm talking about when I say that there are rather vibrating strings inside of each one of us that make a type of music that that's not really just a metaphor, that I'm being actually literal. These are vibrating strings that make an actual music. And I also want to clarify here that these vibrating strings, sometimes they are presented by science and the mindset of objective materialism as that they are like a tyrant, that this is, I'm going to tell the world out there what to do. You're going to do this. You're going to be this shape. You're going to act like this. You're going to do this. I'm DNA. I'm in charge. But in truth, DNA is quite malleable, that it is highly influenced by the world and context around it and by what the larger overarching organism experiences. So now we get down to ethics, because what you're sending out in terms of music and vibration is affecting, let me draw another little cell over here, is affecting this guy over here and making his, let's make his DNA a different color. You're making his DNA, you know, dance in a slightly different way. Let's put some of your color on top of their color. Wow, you're affecting this other guy's thoughts. You're affecting this other guy's physical expression. And guess what? This other guy is sending out energy that is affecting you and your thoughts and your expression. And this is what I mean when I say that we are all genetic instrumentalists, you know, performers in a large symphony of life. Because this is also, if I make a circle, like if I say, this is not just in the cells of your own body, or if you are a human, this person over here is a human, and this person over here is a human. It's not just humans affecting one another. This guy over here, person over here, can be affecting this person over here who might be a microbe, or a blue whale, or a butterfly, or some other form of DNA-bearing life. And so we're at level 1 right now. I'm just keeping it on the idea of people who are all connected like musicians in a symphony playing at the same time. We are all living here right now on October 6th of 2017, and everything that you're emitting on a genetic level, that's some happy music. I hope your genes are emitting happy music. This is literally why I structure my life and my approach in the way that I do. I want everyone around me to be happy and healthy and as abundant as possible, because that makes you emit very happy genetic music, and your happy genetic music reaches out and reaches my genes. And of course, I intentionally cultivate the happy genetic music and send it out to all of you. Now, let me show you what's going on in some of these pictures here. So I got these pictures from a video that I have also shared in the supplemental playlist. And I want to show you, these are really accurate diagrams of what DNA is shaped like. So here's one of the first things in understanding genetic backstory, that when we draw a picture of DNA, sometimes people just draw it like this. I think I've done a pretty good job there. Those all look equal, like all of these little intervals in the music all look like they are the same width. But that's not accurate to what DNA is actually shaped like, because DNA is actually shaped like this, where you can see, let me get a different color here. This is a skinnier little area. Oops, go backwards. And then this is a fatter area. So now if I show you in the actual, here, let me move this thing around. I show you in this actual animation down here. It's a still shot from an animation. This is the skinnier area, and this is the fatter area. And this is literally just like music, because this area is called the minor groove. Like music is groovy and you can play in a major or a minor key. And this area here, the fatter area, is the major groove. And I did not make that up. That's all science talk. So I just really wanted to bring that up because I think that that's totally wonderful. So we literally have a major and a minor groove while we are structured like this in DNA. And what you're seeing, clear out all this ink, what you're seeing in this really detailed animation here is you have a strand of DNA that's coming in and it's wrapping 2 times around a protein, and the protein is called a histone. So these histones, if this yellow thing is a histone, it is kind of like a spool for a piece of thread to wrap around. If this is your DNA, which is like a piece of thread, it wraps around this histone 2 times and then it goes on to the next one. And all of this has to do with epigenetics, this word right here. Oh, Tech is asking 1.6 times to be exact. I do not know if it is 1.6 times or if it is 2 full wrappings, because what happens is you have the DNA wraps around about 2 times, and then it goes on to the next one and it wraps around that one about 2 times, and the next one about 2 times, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and it ends up making a formation that is, let me hold this up way close to the camera so you can see it, exactly like this toroidal shape. So I said to you today that here are some crucial takeaways. I'll get to that question. The DNA is replicating you not just from multiple generations, parent generation to child generation, but within one lifetime from cell to cell. And the other idea is that right now, our DNA has been, or up until this point, has been based on the torus or donut shape. That this toroidal energy structure, that little yellow sculpture I hold up, is the basic shape. And we have that torus represented in the, it's called methylation. This is how tightly coiled and how many times around each little histone the DNA is coiled. And it is also expressed in supercoiling. So supercoiling occurs when we take one of these DNA strands like this, and we start to add energy to it by twisting it up. Like here, imagine this is a twisting motion, you know, like I'm spinning thread, like an old-fashioned lady spinning thread. And the more that I twist it up, 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 the more that it kind of forms these loops that twist in on itself, and it forms more loops and more loops and more loops. And those all begin to make another donut shape. So if I drew, here's like a donut on its side like this, and then here's another donut on its side, like this is the donut hole, another donut on its side, donut on its side, donut on its side. So we have the torus or the donut represented at various different scales of genetic supercoiling. And all of this has to do with epigenetics, which means the code that rules the code. I know I'm being repetitive when I say this over and over because I really feel it's just like learning music. We learn by repetition. Let me move on to the next image. I want to go one more. Oh, I just showed you the histone here, that yellow, let me change colors here. That yellow blob that I drew in the previous one is this structure that's in this picture. And I urge you to check out the supplemental homework video so that you can really see this. And hold on. No. Sometimes this thing drives me crazy. There we go. On to the next one. This is what I wanted to show you. RNA. So now let me choose a good RNA color. This green blob up here is called RNA. So wait. What is RNA? RNA is the messenger that reads the blueprint. This, what I'm highlighting here in green, this is your DNA blueprint. That is what the musical theory of the cosmos, that is like the great composer who's even better than Mozart, wrote this beautiful, here's the notes, wrote all of these beautiful musical notes that are the music of your life and the music that is part of, you know, living, being alive as an organic functional unit. RNA, this big chunky green thing over here, is what goes along this track, like running along a train track, and it reads the notes. And what it does is makes copies, because none of this DNA, none of this original musical score can ever exit the cell nucleus. This is the cell nucleus over here. DNA, oops, all stays inside of the cell nucleus. It doesn't ever go into here. This is the intracellular goo. It doesn't ever go here. This is the extracellular goo. If you want anything to go into either of these two zones, you have to get it through the nuclear membrane, and the DNA does not go through the nuclear membrane. So you have to have your RNA messengers go through the nuclear membrane. These guys over here go through the nuclear membrane. They read the original musical score, and then they create copies of it, and they take it out into the rest of the cell structure, and they either build proteins or perform activities or do whatever this original musical score tells them to do. Okay, I got it. Go back. Hold on, I got to drink a little bit of water here because I'm doing so much talking. RNA can only read this music in the musical score if the pages of the book are not stuck together, quote unquote, pages of the book. Let me see if I have one more picture. Okay, so look at the difference between these two coilings of DNA. See, ooh, here we draw. We've got a pretty long amount of space in between these guys. They're pretty unfurled. And if we go on to the next slide, here you can see these guys are crowded. They're super close together. These guys are stuck together, and that means that it is much, much harder for that big, giant RNA blob to get in here and read the pages. This is exactly like, I'll draw it and then I'll use my hands as the example. If this is a book, and here we've got pages of the book sticking up here. There's a book like this. All right, here's a book. If the pages are open, then it's easy for us to read the information that's inside of it. And if the pages are stuck together here, I'm drawing, these are, one chapter is glued together. I just drew a glued together chapter, which is what this genetic structure over here is like. If this chapter is glued together, then it means that the information in there cannot be read by the RNA messengers and brought outward to the rest of the body to be expressed or to be made into the manifested macroscopic experience of life. And dependent upon what's in this chapter, that could be, you know, a positive or a negative thing. Maybe this chapter says, here's how to grow a horrible tumor and die. Or maybe this chapter says, here is how to dismantle a horrible tumor so you do not have to die. So now we're getting into, because none of this is, you know, just cut and dried. Go back to my face. Here, okay, stop. Go back to my face. So all of this is the idea that your DNA, when DNA was first discovered in like the 1940s, 1950s, it was popularized as an idea. It said, hey, humanity, you've got this structure that tells your body what to do. And it introduced the idea of genetic fatalism. Not that all of your medical conditions would be fatal, but that you were fated to have certain experiences like developing cancer or diabetes. And I went into this in the presentation about cancer. There are subtle cues that we get in this time and place whenever you go to visit the doctor and the doctor says, oh, so let's just take your medical history, any history of cancer, any history of this, any history of that. And there's the subtle imprintation on your genetic dance that just because that existed in a previous generation, that it will necessarily affect you in this generation. But there's no question that the doctor does not seriously, you know, sit down meticulously and ask, hey, were previous generations of your ancestors exposed to excessive chemicals or excessive hormones or excessive amounts of stress, or what were their lives like? Doesn't ask anything about that. So that is the next level of epigenetics. Now, this is many decades after the discovery of DNA, and the understanding has come that identical twins do not develop identical diseases. Identical twins have the same exact genetic code. Their book of life is the same, but we recognize that although their bodies might be very similar, they don't develop identical diseases. You can have one identical twin that gets cancer and one that does not. And it's not simply, well, some of it is based upon chemical exposure, what they ate, drank, and smoked, rather. And also it's based upon what they felt, because now let me do a little bit more whiteboard drawing over here. So let me get to also your DNA has behaviors, what I'm trying to say. If this is your DNA over here, it has behavior about, sometimes it might be tightly coiled up together like this. And then, oh, that RNA messenger just can't get inside there and read it. And sometimes it is loosely coiled like this, and then the RNA messenger can very effectively get in there and read it. And what determines these two different states? And the determination of these two different states has to do with what you're thinking and feeling and believing. So now let's get back to that whole idea of cells affecting one another. My cell structure is over here, and here's a different guy's cell structure over here. Now let's say it's a war of who's thinking what. Let's say this guy's got a program. Oh, I'm trying to draw yellow genes there. He is running the yellow gene program that says, oh, cancer is inevitable. It runs in my family, and he's sending that out to me. And I'm running a different program. I'm running a program over here in my blue genes that says, oh, cancer is a development in response to what you're experiencing in your environment, including whether you are closely methylated like this or loosely unfurled like this. And so I send out that truth to this guy. And then we recognize that we're like two musicians that are having a mutual impact on one another. So we are all affecting one another with the thoughts and ideas and expressions of health that what we are sending out to one another. Okay, now let's get down to the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. because I just said, so if one person has a disease and they think that it's inevitable, then they will broadcast that to everyone else. And this also I got into in the Cancer as a Genetic Invader webinar, that is one of the ways that this disease is propagated through the species. This idea of inevitability and being marinated in the environment of other people who also have it and being exposed to it genetically. It's like if someone is making music like this, cover your ears. I'm not playing too loud because my dog is here. That is ugly music. And let's say everyone around you is playing ugly music. It starts to affect the quality of the dance movements. Let me put this stuff down for a moment, of your DNA. So your DNA is constantly dancing. Let's get into this now. I already spoke to you about how it is supercoiled. An old lady winding threads together, and she keeps on winding it together and winding it together until it's this giant coiled together rope. And it has its, particular, it's like a crochet, it's like knitted together. If we want to access something that's in there, what has to happen is enzymatic snippers have to come along and snip out a little something to relieve the tension, because it's so tightly coiled that you can't get in there in order to access stuff that needs to be read. So those enzymatic snippers are part of this genetic dance. I'm trying to say that the DNA, it makes loops, and I'll get into the shape of the loops, and then we'll get into the exact shape and performance of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna. It gets in, it creates loops. When DNA is going to replicate itself in order to create another blueprint that the RNA messenger can take out of the cell and share with the rest of the body. Let me grab a picture here. This is a picture screenshot taken from another video animation that I have as part of the, did it not get saved here? Hold on a minute. Oh, I thought I was so organized today. Hold on a minute. This is terrible. I thought I had it all set up. Here we go. I got it. Say, remain faithful, class. I've got it. So this is taken from another animation. That is a screenshot. That is one of these science-based electron scanning microscope, molecular / CGI animations. And I know it's a little bit blurry, but you can also see here that we've got the major groove, and then we've also got the little tiny skinny minor groove. So now you kind of have an idea of what's going on. And in the animation, you can see this blue thing that I'm highlighting in red spins around very fast like the jet engine, like the turbine of a jet engine. And as it spins around, we have a DNA that is coming into here, and it is comprised of two threads that are woven together. And this giant whirling jet engine turbo splits that DNA into like a Y shape, where we now have like a zipper that's been unzipped. And I use this all the time, and I'll show you that picture that I use all the time. And the idea is that there are certain formulae of who's allowed to match up with who in these dance partners of the genetic zipper, that there are only certain combinations that one may do in the dance movement. It's just like dancing the waltz. There's a formula. You dance first position, say 1, 2, 3, 4. These are where you're supposed to be. And you literally have 1, 2, 3, 4 different amino acids that you can put together into this genetic dance. So when, oh, here, wait, let me clear this out. When this gets split up into this Y shape, half of the Y comes around here in this loop, and half of the Y, oops, sorry, wrong direction. Half of the Y comes down here in this loop that I'm making a giant fat red thing there, and half of it comes out in this loop over here. And it's a dynamic movement is the first idea to get across. And the second idea to get across is that we can place the Flying Rainbow Lasagna within that dynamic movement as a form of genetic placeholder in order to rearrange these 1, 2, 3, 4 amino acids or dance steps into new formations, into new dance steps. So that is what I come to share with humanity, with people on this planet, with everyone that's here, or with anyone that's got DNA, or even with anyone that's got any kind of a structure that is ordinarily toroidal, because I say this all the time. I'm sorry if I'm repetitive. It's like learning a song. We add an additional degree, add an additional dimension, and in so doing, we add an additional degree of freedom. So if the previous formation, grab my sculpture, of toroidal shaped DNA and time structure is the equivalent of a flat piece of paper or a flat leaf that the little ant that I'm always talking about is walking upon, then we add another dimension by folding it into a higher dimensional state. And by doing so, we achieve another degree of freedom. And it means there's more things that we can do. So on the one hand, it is the release of limitations. All of the events that are plastered on the outside of that torus, picture time, every time, I wish that I could just project these pictures directly into your mind instead of having to scroll through. The series of events that are plastered on the outside of the torus. Here we go. Here we go. Oh, and here's some good pictures. I'm showing you lots of good pictures. Wait. I got one more for you. Here we go. Okay. And here's a color. Okay, this is what I'm talking about. The series of events that are plastered along the outside of the torus. Remember my teaching about vortex-based math? And that's what this graphic is from. The idea of the torus as an array of vectors that represent all the various different mathematical possibilities: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. And that if you do it right, it's like a Sudoku puzzle where all of these events of your life must fit together in certain combinations or patterns or recipes. And there's a very particular recipe that is the way that these numerical patterns are expressed on the torus. And that means that there's a particular recipe of things that can and cannot happen in your life. I'm going to sneeze. Can and cannot happen in your life or in your biology or what you expect as truth. But if we can, Flying Rainbow Lasagna, if we can turn this torus into, I'm very roughly drawing a Flying Rainbow Lasagna shape there, you get it though. If we can turn that torus into a Flying Rainbow Lasagna, it means that we can take what, might have been a sequence like 5, 4, 8, 6, and we can take a sequence over here that might have been, 7, 9, 2, 3, and we can take some of this from over here, and some of this from over here, and then some of this from over here, and we can make a new sequence that might instead go 4, 7, 3, and we didn't have the capacity to do that when everything was structured like this before. We got the capacity to gain an additional degree of freedom. More things that you can do. It's like adding a new variable to the quantum experiment of the laboratory of your body so that you can do more stuff and explore more stuff. So here's another, I didn't draw this. This is not my own work. I'm sharing this in order to show the idea that, and this is not like when you don't have this in your, this is a artistic interpretation that you do not have this in your cell structure. You never have like an X-shaped chromosome down here with just, one little part of it trailing outward and then becoming methylate, unfurled like this. That's not what happens. What happens is this whole entire thing over here gets unfurled like this, and then it dances and it gets twisted together, it gets spliced together, enzymes created, enzymes break it apart, enzymes put it back together. It's dancing, and it's dancing in prescribed patterns. So this shows all of these, here I'll show you the torus pattern. So you can see these are tori here, like that's a donut hole, that's another donut hole, that's another donut hole. These are all donuts going all the way down here. So one of the ways that we can make a Flying Rainbow Lasagna happen at the genetic level is by making all of these, I'll draw a bunch of donuts. These are just donuts on their side. You can imagine with the donut holes going through where I just made that axis. All of those donuts start to jump up and down, and then they become Flying Rainbow Lasagnas. Here's another Flying Rainbow Lasagna, and they overlap because, of course, the Flying Rainbow Lasagna itself is a dynamic shape. And that means that we get to have more genetic combinations, more variables, more genetic combinations. So this is a familiar picture that I've shown you many times before. Get a color you can see here. Wait, get a color you can see. Okay, this is that twisted together strand of just 2 strands of DNA, like a yarn, and then it gets cut off into a Y by that little turbo propeller that's over here that splits the zipper in half. And ordinarily, we can clearing things out. So you can see ordinarily we can only have a G with a C. Those are the dance partners. They're like, we are only allowed to dance with each other. And this guy over here is only allowed to dance with this partner over here. And this partner over here is only allowed to dance with this partner over here. These are the prescribed dance movements that have been going on for many hundreds, if not thousands of years. Now, when we put the Flying Rainbow Lasagna in the middle there, what it does is it stabilizes this genetic structure with the zipper unzipped. And because ordinarily, if you unzipped a bunch of your DNA and just left it like that, you'd turn into a pile of goo. We need structure. So what we do is place this genetic placeholder in this structure, and then that allows this to rotate into new formats where now all of a sudden we can connect this guy over here to this guy. Oh, wait, let me do a better one. Let me do a better one. We can connect this guy over here to this guy. Oh, look at that. That's a new dance partner, but it's not against the music. We can connect this guy against this guy. Oh, look, a new dance partner. Here, this guy can go to this guy. That's just like I was showing you with rearranging the numbers that are on the skin of the torus. Those numbers represent your moments of death, your final denouements, the end result of a particular quote unquote genetic science experiment that is called What Happens If I Do This in the Choose Your Own Adventure novel of your life. Let me go back to my face. All of these moments of death, when you splat on the membrane of death, do you know what I'm talking about? Anyone who's new to this, let me draw it in the whiteboard so that I'm not just using terms that people don't understand. Time vortex that I draw all the time, which is the lower quadrant of that yellow sculpture. And this is birth, and this is the infinite timeline that goes out of this little wormhole over here. And all the rest of these timelines terminate on the membrane of death. And this big fat red line that I'm making is the membrane of death. And of course, we're looking at a cross section. So it's this one over here too. When you change color so you can see. When you travel up a timeline like this and you splat on the membrane of death, what happens is you did a calculation. You said, oh, what happens if I add together this plus this plus this plus this plus this plus this plus this equals this right here, equals that moment right there. And we don't have just one of those. We have a nearly uncountable number of final denouements that are the versions of us that have splatted on the membrane of death, like a bug splatting on the windshield of your car. And those are all the end results of a set of calculations that we perform with our life, with our physical body, by moving through the time field. And there's only this one possible answer to the math problem that is correct. This, what I just drew, this big fat blue line, is the only possible answer to this math proof that gets us out of this membrane of death and allows us to go up to the next level of consciousness, where we then begin again, like we're now at the beginning point of the next time field, time vortex. And then, of course, we begin circulating up through there again and again. So now you know what I'm talking about. Okay, let me drink some water. Let me check the time, see how much time I've got. I know I'm talking super fast because I'm trying to get lots of information in here. Okay, I definitely have at least 15 more minutes on this. And I will get to questions in the chat too. How do we actually perform this activity? So as I've said many, many times, the Flying Rainbow Lasagna is a verb. It is not merely a concept. It's not like I just invite people into this classroom here in order to say, like, let's just talk about concepts. That would be if I were a musician and I said, let's just come here and just talk about musical notes. Let's talk about a D flat. Let's talk about, you know, what happens when we play an E. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is say, this is what D flat is. This is what it looks like when we draw it as musical notation. This is what it sounds like. And this is how you can express it with your own instrument in a musical fashion. So I'm the first Flying Rainbow Lasagna, but not the only. I just got to drink more. It's like saying the first person that ever wrote the song, whatever, Stairway to Heaven. They wrote the song, but they're not the only person that can ever sing that song. It's actually possible for everyone to sing that song if they want to. Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for reminding others, because I have the external mic on, so I cannot tell if there's background chatter. Thank you for muting yourselves, because I cannot hear you and it shows up as feedback in the recording. Drinking. Yeah. Stairway to Heaven, or whatever song has been written as an original song, can be performed or sung by other artists. So the Flying Rainbow Lasagna is an original melody that I created and invented. a song that can be played on the musical instrument of your physical body. I played this song on the instrument of this body when the previous occupant was, being murdered or was dying, in order for the physical structure of this body not to die. And I have continued to play this song with this body structure in order to have profound neurological healing and transform my consciousness and continue flying through the time field. That this is my approach to not having to hit that curved membrane of death by transforming on a genetic level. So again, I said this in the introduction today, it is not ethical for me to impose this upon anyone or everyone. I'm trying to make an evil face, like, you must Flying Rainbow Lasagna now. It's not like that at all. You can't even imagine it, because the whole idea of Flying Rainbow Lasagna is unconditional love, which has a lot of acceptance as its root, and freedom. That this is my response to being genetically constrained, that feeling and perceiving the constraints of this physical structure. I said, hey, I know something that can be done that can transcend those constraints. And the thing that can be done is this new song. I'm going to sing and play this new song with my body, because that's the only thing you're allowed to do. You're not actually allowed to sing and play songs with other people's instruments. You're not actually allowed to do that. And what we understand with the ethics that I just explained to everyone, due to DNA affecting one another, that what you are sending out necessarily affects other people, and what other people are doing necessarily affects you. So these are the ethics of me being here. First of all, it wouldn't be appropriate if I didn't have a body and I was just on some higher dimensional cloud with my magic wand, and I said, I'm going to wave my magic wand and poof, I'm going to lasagnify you all. That would not be ethical. That would not be correct. Okay, let me mute everybody who needs to be muted. Hold on a second. Mute all so that there's no feedback. Thank you for that. It would not be ethical for me to impose Flying Rainbow Lasagna upon everyone. The ethical thing for me to do is to say, hey, here is an opportunity. If you're interested, please participate. So let's use nearsightedness as an example. So let me draw some DNA. Hold on a second. Get some. So this goes back to, let's say, the early 20th century, when there were some indigenous people in the far north, like near Alaska, that were not yet literate. Their culture was mostly an oral storytelling culture, and they did not have nearsightedness either. They did beadwork that was very, very fine. They were able to see very far away. They used their eyes for things that were other than reading words that are printed in a straight line. This is like the late 1800s, early 1900s, okay? And when that particular indigenous population began to become literate, schoolhouses were set up. We're going to help these poor indigenous people to become literate, right? That was the mental mindset of the people at the time. Of course, I'm being relatively sarcastic and reflecting their mindset to you. They said, oh, we're going to help them out, make sure that they can read and write and do their arithmetic. And what they started to find was that a lot of the younger generation that was becoming literate also became nearsighted. So there was a particular eye doctor named Dr. Bates, who went up there to the cold frozen north, and he did some investigation, and he found out that, that it was not a genetic problem, that it was not a question of the parents being nearsighted and then passing their nearsightedness down to their children, to their offspring, either in their genes or in their behavior, that it was entirely behavioral. So let's say right now I have these blue squiggles that are drawn up here. The blue squiggle represents non-nearsightedness. And let's say this red jagged dance represents nearsightedness. So what happened was, through being exposed to the cognitive dissonance of becoming literate, this is what it means to be, when you become literate, your brain is asked to do things that are actually very uncomfortable on a basic biological level, like making your eyes move in perfect straight lines and having to focus on little tiny things for, let's say, many hours at a time. If you're reading a book and you're making your eyes move in perfect straight lines in a tiny little area for, an hour or two at a time, that is this genetic dance. And when that genetic dance is imposed upon these blue natural squiggles, that makes the person, here I'm drawing some eyeglasses, become nearsighted rather, and have to wear glasses for corrective lenses. And what Bates did was he created a set of exercises that where you could rest your eyes in between doing these little tiny tasks, and also taught people to move their eyes instead of in these perfect straight lines like that, to move them almost in arcs, like swinging their eyes in arcs all around like that throughout the visual field, because that is a more natural way to use our eyes and our system of perception. It's totally antithetical to what we do when we have a school system. Here I'm drawing like a blackboard. Here's the blackboard over here. Here's all the kids sitting in their desks. And what we say to the kids is, focus on the blackboard, focus on the blackboard. Don't look over here out the window at a squirrel or at a tree. Don't look at your shoes. Don't look at your friends. Don't look over here. And that is a very unnatural way of using the eyes. So this is one example of how what is considered, oh, nearsightedness, this is a genetic propensity. No, this is not a genetic propensity. This is literally a dance, this jagged red dance that has been taught by one member of society to another member of society. And then of course the parents who themselves are nearsighted, through their reading and focusing on the blackboard and unnatural use of their eyes and cognitive dissonance of being literate, then pass those tendencies along to their children, is this tendency to use the eyes in an unnatural way by staring. So there are things that can be done in order to improve nearsightedness. I'm just using that as one example. Let's use aging as another example. Here, let me erase make some space over here. I didn't know there's a truck out the window. The aging. Let's say that this blue, let's say that this, you got this blue, oops, that's not what I wanted. Hold on a minute, go back to this. Okay, let's say that this blue dance that's going on in there is the dance of not aging and becoming more decrepit as you move through time. But just, moving through time, like yesterday, today, tomorrow, does not necessarily mean that we have to lose cellular vitality or become more sick or less connected to the divine world as we move through time. But then let's say that you're a little tiny infant, and that's the program that you're running. Like, I'm just going to move through time and not lose my divine connection. But then let's say you have all these other people around you that are doing a different dance. And there's mommy and daddy and teacher and all these people that are all doing the slashy red dance, the slashy red dance, the slashy red dance. And what you actually do, as you're this little guy over here, you're this little baby, you start to dance like a slashy red dance because you are being influenced by all of these people over here. This guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. So everybody who's got heart disease, tooth decay, everybody who's overweight, all these people that little babies and little infants meet and look at, they all imprint upon that. They all imprint upon those body structures and those genetic structures and the music that is being emitted on a genetic level. And they say, oh, this is what it is to be human. This is what it is to live in this world. And then it becomes a much more subtle program, as we become older and as we become verbal and literate, that we understand, you read something, some blah, blah happened to someone and they got this disease. And then you say to yourself, oh, if I do that, then I'll get that disease too. And it is a subtle program that is running. Not that I am a transhumanist or that I equate you to an organic computer at all, but these thought structures are programs that determine the expression of your cellular behavior and also the expression of events in your life. Because it could be something like whether you smashed your car on the highway in a physical accident. It's not merely whether you develop a disease like cancer, that these malformed genetic codes can also lead to malformed experiences. And then again, the solution that I have, that what I offer here, is the idea of Flying Rainbow Lasagne, dancing in a new pattern. So many people say to me, what do I do? What do I actually do? It is an actual dance, and I'm going to get into the actual dance in level 2. So please, tune in again or stay tuned into what comes next. So first, we're learning music. We're going to learn music theory. What's D flat? What is all this? How does this affect the body? And then we actually begin to play. And the example of actually playing is the idea that you actually begin to rearrange in your body. So how, and I'll talk about this now and I'll talk about this in level 2. So let me go through the actual steps of how to dance like a flying rainbow lasagna. Because, like I said, you don't just stare at your muscles and say, muscles, get stronger, get stronger. You actually go to the gym and perform some exercises that make it get stronger. So in order to get your ordinarily, ducking off camera, toroidal energy field to pop forward into the next highest dimension and create this shape, the mental exercise is understanding or stretching or doing the yoga of perception that this singularity can jump up and down super fast and be in two places at the same time. This is the singularity and this is the singularity. Singularity, 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 singularity. And that it's jumping up and down so fast, I almost think of it like an egg beater, like some kind of a movement that combines together these two formerly divergent realms. This is the solution to duality. Thing versus thing, hot versus cold, light versus dark, anything that is separated by a membrane where this thing on this side of the membrane is different from this thing that's different on this side of the membrane. And this includes the membrane that is known as the cell membrane, because I say this all the time with my funny voice. With the invention of the cell membrane, individuated cells said, I only have to care about what is inside of my membrane. I'm looking out for number one. That's the only thing that matters. And it's true, then that's a particular level of development. However, if we go, show the whiteboard here, get the pencil going. If these are all different individuated cells and each cell has their own individual nucleus in there, a lot of these cells say, hey, I'm looking out for number one. I only have to care about my blue dance. I don't have to care about my me inside of me. But if you understand that you are within, you are within this much larger body. I just drew an epidermis. These are the cell membranes that I just highlighted in red. And this is the epidermis that I just highlighted in red. And now all of a sudden there's a completely different perspective, that it's not just, oh, this guy has to look out for what's inside of him, that it's actually all of these cells have to work together because they are all inside of this much larger structure. That is the physical analogy of a multicellular body. Now we need to look to the, where's my thing, analogy of a multicellular time body, that you're not just living your own life. You're not just having your own existence. You are connected to the microbes in your tummy that help you to digest your food. You're connected to the yeasts that live on your surface of your skin. There's little tiny mites that live on your eyelashes. It's all in symbiotic relationship. It's what it's supposed to be. There's the atmospheric bacteria that are not pathogenic rather. There's all the other people like you. There's dogs and cats and redwood trees and blue whales. And then there's, insects. We could not live without the insect world. That all of this is understanding the interconnectedness of the symphony of life just in this moment. All right. And so I'm going to wrap up for level one. Stay tuned with me. I'm going to answer all the questions in the chat room. Level two is going to be about applying this concept across time. So the first aspect here is understanding the genetic template. You have your own quantum laboratory. You get to do what you want to do with your own cell structure, knowing that you're affecting the other people that are still alive alongside of you here in this time and place. And in the level two, once we've taken responsibility for our own individuated body, we then begin to connect across time. People that might have lived thousands of years ago, our descendants that will live in many hundreds or thousands of years, and being able to connect Flying Rainbow Lasagne, our DNA, to those musicians at that time. So that's what's coming up on level two. Like I said, it's just like physics. We do first the beginning level, talk about the basic structures, and the advanced level talk about more complex behaviors. So that is what we are doing this week. Now I get to Q&A on this level one stuff. Okay, so Tech had been asking about the crystal spiral. Is the actual fractal, not the infinite loop AI. So you're talking about this structure here that is, many people feel constrained and like they don't like this structure. And that is because this structure has been applied aberrantly. Just like I say, you don't have to not like your nose because, you get a cold or the flu and all of a sudden your nose is stuffed up. You don't have to be like, I gotta get rid of my nose. I hate my nose. It's full of mucus. It's not good. No, your nose has problems with pathogens, and that is why it doesn't feel comfortable to you. This structure has a problem with pathogens. The occupiers of the interstices, where I'm putting my pen right now, that membrane of death contains people and their consciousnesses that are not dissolving and going to entropy as they're supposed to. And that is quite troublesome. And that is what we don't like. That is the equivalent of mucus up the nose or blockages in the metabolic functioning of the larger time body. Don't blame the time body. Don't try to get rid of your chakras. Heal them, heal the time body. So what do we do with those occupiers of the interstices? Everyone's like, oh, send it back to the source, back to the source, back to the source. Not everything is meant to go back to the source. Some things are meant to go into a state of total entropy. And if I may go further into the representation of the Flying Rainbow Lasagna, when the singularity is jumping back and forth between these two positions, it can have different qualities. Up here, it can have the quality of total energy, having consciousness, having energy, having heat, having motion. And down here, it can have the quality of having no motion, no heat, total coldness, no consciousness, total lack of consciousness. And that is the equivalent of a Bose-Einstein condensate, what I've spoken about in the past. That is a super dense state of matter, even more dense than the physical solid matter that we are familiar with here, some solid matter over here, that if we took this matter and we slowed it down and made it cold so that it was so cold it was only a fraction of a degree above absolute zero, which is Kelvin, Tech is saying black hole, not black hole, but getting similar. Because at the end of our cosmos, this is according to science's story, all right? At the end of our, not cosmos, rather, universe, this particular timeline, we've had all the stars born, all the stars have lived and metabolized, and now all the stars have died and made black holes. I should draw a picture of this. I can just show this much easier with pictures. Let's draw something here. All of these are stars that have lived their lives and then they've died and they backflipped into themselves and now they're black holes. Black hole here, black hole here, 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 here. In fact, what ends up happening is the entire universe becomes nothing but a Swiss cheese of black holes. And let's say red represents light and heat and consciousness. All of the light, heat, and consciousness goes into the black holes. It's like the water going down the drain at the end of a bath. Everything drains out of this cosmos. Everything drains out of this universe. And it all goes into, now let's say the next place where it goes into is the blue. It comes out the other side. It comes in, these black holes are actually portals that go somewhere. So all of that energy actually comes out somewhere and goes to the next place. So it's not quite that energy goes into a black hole. Now I'm going to do this. All of this, what I'm highlighting in black, after those black holes suck out all of the light and consciousness and energy and movement of this universe, the only thing that's left is a totally cold, dark place that's full of Swiss cheese black holes. That there's no more light, there's no more heat, there's no more molecular motion. The entire universe here at the end of the universe becomes a Bose-Einstein condensate. That means that all of the atoms become so cold that they begin to overlap on top of one another. They don't move through time anymore, and they achieve unity consciousness, but at the opposite end, not at the end of total light, total awareness, total movement, lots of energy, the presence of lots of motion. They come to unity consciousness at the other end of the spectrum, which is total darkness, total cold, no molecular motion, but they still achieve unity consciousness. When I say unity, I'm not talking about any kind of law of one, channeled information, nothing like that kind of stuff. I'm talking about a very specific concept of this consciousness being a unified consciousness. That unified consciousness exists in a state of total energy and also in a state of total entropy. And that's why some consciousnesses are moving in the direction of entropy, loss of energy, that they're supposed to get less aware. They're supposed to move slower and slower and slower and lose their energy. It's like in this capitalistic system, most people think, oh, you're trying to earn money. You're trying to get more money in order to get where you want to go. But in this entropic system, you win by losing money. It's like, oh, did you lose $100 today? Good job, you're closer to entropy. Did you lose 100 units of energy today? Good job, you are closer and closer to entropy. And that is what those occupiers of the interstices here on the membrane of death, that's what they're supposed to do. they're supposed to lose their energy until they get into a cold, frozen state. I just pretended that I'm frozen, like a bug splatted on the windshield, a cold, frozen state where there is no more molecular motion. And the problem that we've been having with that toroidal shape and the structure of our consciousness and the structure of our society is that there has been bleed through where those occupiers of the interstices are moving, even though they're in a place where they're supposed to be cold and frozen and stuck. So that is not what they're supposed to be doing. And the best thing to do to them is not give them more energy, but to take their energy away from them or send them towards a totally entropic state. Okay, so I think, are there any more questions in the chat? If there are, I'm happy to answer them. If not, I would like to take a brief break in order to WALK, my furry overlord, and then return for level 2. Any more questions? Thank you. If not, I'm going to say thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Thank you to everyone who has asked wonderful questions. And don't go anywhere. We're just about to do level 2. We're going to learn how to dance like a flying rainbow lasagna across time. Thank you so very much.